Flex Network. This is the Flex Network. Flex on them. Flex on everybody. This right here is the Flex Network. Yeah. Flex.
Oh, yes. Welcome back to the Flex Network. I'm your host, as always, Flex Shane. To my right, you guys know him as Season Long Says. I know him as the Dragon because he's spitting fire all over your Twitter timelines. Alan Seslowski, how are you, brother?
Oh, what an introduction, man. I'm getting used to this. You're treating me way too good with these introductions, man. I'm starting to look forward to them every week, you know?
Every week. Hey, listen, you keep spitting fire every week. You keep grinding, jumping on about 17 different podcasts. Hey, we're gonna toot you up because he's rising up the fantasy industry, ladies and gentlemen. The name to know.
You're the man, Shane. I love you.
Good morning, Diggs Den. One of our boys, Ryan. How you doing, brother? Happy Memorial Day weekend. Yes, and to all my American friends, including you, Alan, happy Memorial Day tomorrow. Any big plans for the weekend?
Well, you know, given the current landscape of the pandemic, it's kind of just another day. So, you know, I'm trying to acknowledge it's Memorial Day, you know, grateful for all of those who have fallen. But what better time to talk some fantasy football? And I'm really looking forward to the conversation today.
Absolutely. Okay, so just real quick, getting it out of the way, guys, if you like what we're doing here, please like, subscribe on YouTube. Please rate and review us on podcasts.
Comment too.
Oh, yes, comment. We love your comments. I guess it works with the algorithm. So, you know, when people search fantasy football, we'll comment back. Yeah. Absolutely. Follow us on Twitter at the Flex Network 1. Follow Al at Alan Seslowski, AlanSeslowsky.
Yeah,
I just call him Seslowski.
There you go.
That's right. So today, what we want to talk about, we're primarily going to talk about just different types of fantasy games. It's still early in the fantasy season. Redraft season probably really starts July. But I'm assuming that if you're listening to this podcast in May, a Memorial Day long weekend, you're probably a bit of a fantasy enthusiast, as Alan says. I call y'all degenerates, just like myself, right. But Alex used the word enthusiast. So we thought that we'd just explore some of the different types of fantasy games, whether it's adding different layers to your current redraft format or just branching out to different types of games. But before we do that, one of the things I wanted to talk about with you, Al, is just players that we've had blind spots with. I kind of, you know, this is kind of a fun little review. There's a player that I've, or you know, he's no longer in the league.
Why don't you define?
I will absolutely. Okay, so there's players that have, you know, there's a guy that I just really never had on my fantasy teams, and there's a current player who's being drafted right now that I just never seem to have any shares of. So I define a blind spot player as a guy that you aren't necessarily lower on, say, than EDP. But you just, for whatever reason, whenever that guy is up there, you just never quite click the button on him. And, you know, there's definitely a current player today that I feel like the fantasy industry on is quite high. And he's got a pretty reasonable ADP in a pretty good situation, but I've got no shares of him. But before I get to my player, Al, who's the guy that you, either past or present, have just always had a blind spot on?
Yeah, no, that this is a really great topic because I think we all have those players we like, players we even think are priced fair, and even when they perform, we still pass on them at ADP. And mine is Kenny Golladay. Okay. I mean, he finished as the wide receiver 9 last year. Was probably going to finish as a top 5 before Matt Stafford went down. Looked mostly QB proof, does everything you want in a wide receiver, but just because we have this perception that the Lions, Detroit Lions, are an anemic offense, you know, there are Kenny Golladay people out there, but for some reason, every time he comes up in the 3rd round or if he slips to the 4th, I stupidly pass. I got to get me some Kenny Golladay. I have a blind spot, and it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, you know what's kind of funny about Kenny Golladay? I was the same way. And then I just ended up acquiring him in a couple of dynasty leagues that I'm in. I actually just traded him away in one, not because I disliked him, but because, you know, just that's how the offer kind of fell. But Kenny Golladay is a guy that I really have not had a lot of shares in regular redraft type leagues, but he's a guy that I would absolutely be comfortable with. As look,
he's,
if I
he's going wide receiver 8 right now. He's going around pick. Let's see, his overall ADP is 25. So he's going, you have to take him in the first couple picks of the third round. I mean, it seems perfectly fair, the price,
Well, if you go RB early and you want to get a legit wide receiver 1 on his team, absolute beast, has really, they called him Babytron for a lot of years, but Kenny Golladay is a guy that I would absolutely be comfortable with as my wide receiver 1. But I understand why you might have a blind spot for him. So a past player for me was always a guy like Doug Baldwin. And I think that it just has to do with one of my innate biases where if a guy doesn't break out till his 5th year, I have a really hard time pulling the trigger on him, even when he goes year after year. So we really had 3 golden years. From 2015 to 2017 is when he really finished as one of the top wide receivers. But, ultimately he kind of fell off the map last year when he had the injury, and then he retired.
Yeah,
and then he retired.
That was it.
Yeah. Well, I guess it was 2 years he had the injury, which of course, coincided with the Tyler Lockett breakout, which totally makes sense. But one of the current players that I just have not had any shares on, he's one of the guys that Evan Silva has talked about recently. So I feel like his ADP is probably going up because of that, but it's Calvin Ridley.
Yeah.
So Calvin Ridley last year, he finished as the wide receiver 27. In 2018, he finished as a wide receiver 22, but he only played 13 games. So when you look at actual points per game, he finished as wide receiver 20. So currently, he is being drafted as a wide receiver 17 and 36 overall, which is right around that 3-4 turn. So to me, I don't know, look, Calvin Ridley, he is an efficient player. When I look at his stats from last year, so he had 63 receptions, which he was 31st in the league. He had 866 yards, which was 30th in the league. But he was number 20 with 735 completed air yards last year. And he was tied with a big cluster as number 13 in terms of TDs. He had 7 total TDs. And obviously the narrative this year is that with Austin Hooper gone, yes, they brought in a guy like Hayden Hurst, but the expectation is that with the fact that he's an efficient wide receiver and he's continuing to build trust with Matt Ryan, who threw 616 attempts last year, 41 attempts per game, and they didn't exactly get, I would say it's a push going from Freeman last year to Gurley this year, that he's just going to get more opportunity. But I just find I've got a blind spot for this guy. What are your thoughts on Calvin Ridley?
Yeah, I mean, the upside is obvious, right? I mean, you talked about it. Austin Hooper's gone. That's 90 plus targets out the door. Sure, Hayden Hurst is going to absorb some of those, but Julio is kind of maxed out. Like Julio's already a 150 target player. He's not going to get 100. He's not going to get 200 targets. It's not going to happen, right?
Yeah.
So Julio is who he is. So there's room for growth. And presumably, you always, old school thinking was the 3rd-year breakout. Calvin Ridley's a little bit of an older prospect compared to where he came out. So we could be looking at a mega breakout here, but this is what's interesting. I heard this discussion the other day on a podcast where they're talking about how running back versus wide receiver opportunity. And obviously running back, it's a position of opportunity. If you get there and you're the 3rd running back and the other 2 have been injured, but wide receivers create their own opportunity. And how do they do that, Shane? They do that by getting open. So the more they get open, the more opportunity they're going to get. Running backs are not going to increase their opportunity because they don't get open. They get handed the football. So if you think Calvin Ridley is a good player, the path has been cleared for him. He was only about a 95 target player last year. He didn't break 100 targets. So
yeah, he had 93 targets.
Yeah, for him and there's no greater indicator of fantasy production than targets. I mean, it's just, I think I forget the exact ratio, but it might be something like 2.5 to 3 targets equals 1 carry. I mean, that's how significant it is. So,
yeah,
I mean, the other way around. Sorry. So
I think it was 2.3. Yeah, 2.3.
Yeah. So double. So every, I mean, just by getting 5 targets, it's like getting 10 carries. If you get 8 targets, like 16 carries. And how excited will we be for a 16 carry running back? So in order for him to jump from that 95 target to that 130 target player, I mean, the path is there. It's so obvious to see, but you're betting on that if you want to take him in the early 3rd round. I mean, his 4th round ADP, I agree, it's perfectly fine. He'll probably be a 3rd round player if market movers like Evan Silva keep talking him up. But I have not been able to get him either. I'm going to have to be a little reachy if I want to get him, because I do want to get him. It's so obvious to see the upside here.
Well, I think, you and I both like to play a lot of best ball. And I think that in some cases where I might be choosing between, I don't know, Juju, DK, those are other wide receivers going in that range, I might just have to take a shot on Calvin Ridley because I'd like to have at least a little bit of like a few shares of them. And, when I was going through this exercise, I realized, man, I haven't had literally, I don't think a single Calvin Ridley in any league in the last, 3 years that he's been in the league. Maybe in the odd best ball in previous years, but who knows about that. One last thing I do want to just point out is that he was very efficient. Going back to your targets, he had 9.3 yards per target, which was number 23 in the league. So if he can maintain that efficiency, and we know that he's got that explosive upside, I think that he could outperform his ADP. And he's got that upside.
There's room to grow. I mean, like I said, a lot of guys that get maxed out, like you can clearly see targets are gone. He's a good player. The other guy is already maxed out. It's there for the taking. It's very clear cut.
Well, and they didn't bring anybody in, like any other wide receivers into that range. So
they didn't draft CD Lamb when they could have.
Exactly.
Totally.
Although some would argue that, Atlanta had probably one of the worst drafts up there with Green Bay, but we're not going to discuss that today. Okay, so those are some of our blind spot players. Guys, if you have any blind spot players, tweet us. One of the things that, one of the ways that we know that you're going to listen to our show, throw in that hashtag flex, FLEX, hashtag flex. That way we know you're listeners to the show. And, we'll respond regardless, but that just makes us feel warm inside. Okay, Al, let's get to the main topic of the show today, different types of fantasy games. So I would say, the average, every fantasy player, if you're listening to the show, knows what your standard redraft, snake draft type leagues are. A lot of them will have 2 running backs, either 2 or 3 wide receivers, a tight end spot, a flex spot. But today on the show, we want to talk a little bit about, okay, how can you spice up your regular redraft leagues, and then how can you just get a little bit more into the fantasy football universe / general, just sports betting universe, and really just make Sundays even a little bit more interesting. So I'm going to start with the redraft leagues. Some of the ways that we've been talking about for a year now, since we started our podcast, was changing from Superflex to tight end premium. Last year we were in a league together where we did a 2 tight end league. What are your thoughts? I mean, to me, it's kind of a no-brainer at this point. Superflex is becoming more and more popular, but what do you say to people who are reluctant?
Yeah, I mean, no one likes change. Some people, they just like to do things how they always were. And I mean, it was no secret that quarterback in start one leagues, it kind of makes the position marginalized. I mean, the most important position of all sports is a position you don't need to worry about. In fantasy football makes no sense. So obviously, adding Superflex, I parallel that to adding PPR about 5 years ago, where nobody wanted to add PPR. Now you're not even going to play in non-PPR leagues. You're just not going to do it. It's not fun. It's not exciting. Your brain's not calibrated to draft in non-PPR. So, and I think that's where we're headed with Superflex tight end premium. More so Superflex is that the quarterback position should be valued as much as the running back position. And what's great about these early Superflex drafts and these Superflex dynasty drafts that you and I play in is that the thinking hasn't there's more and more people open to playing in them, but the thinking hasn't caught up. They're still pushing the quarterback down the board. Whereas, my strategy has been to collect these guys because there's no more valuable position than quarterback in a Superflex league. So to answer your question directly, I love it. My brain is starting to be a Superflex mindset only, and I'm almost resisting my 1 quarterback leagues. I just don't like devaluing the quarterback that much, personally.
Well, so one of the just general overall criticisms with fantasy football is that it doesn't always reflect the true value that a player has for their team. So, for example, like in fantasy football, I would argue we overvalue the touchdown versus, how important it is for a guy like I don't know, I'm throwing out Julian Edelman, who might not have a ton of touchdowns in a year, but, his importance to his team is huge because of the receptions, cue that with the PPR leagues, as well as just the actual overall yardage on his team, right? That's important. The fact that you could argue, well, it's not really even an argument, the quarterback is the most important player on his football team. And the fact that in all sports, well, I mean, you could argue the goalie in hockey is pretty important.
Yes, I think you can argue but nothing more important.
Right. Okay. Yes.
Yes.
True.
And I would say the goalie is probably second.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. So the fact that, in a one quarterback league, and especially if you're playing in like a smaller league, like a 10-team league, quarterback is essentially irrelevant in a lot of cases. And that's just, to me, that's not right. Whereas you add, and we recommend super flex versus 2 quarterback, because I found 2 quarterbacks a little bit too rigid, when you start getting with injuries and bye weeks. But in a super flex league, it adds value to a player who is the most valuable player on their team. So just another thing that I recommend, Al, I mean, say you're already in a super flex league and you want to spice it up a little bit more. If you're playing in a smaller league, I would say no more than either a 10 to 12 team league, consider adding a second tight end position, make it tight end premium. Or if you're a very rigid league and,
well, tight end, let's define tight end premium, because there's a couple different ways to define it. Okay. So this is how for people who've been playing tight end premium, it basically lifts the points for receptions from tight ends from 1 to 1.5. But I've seen it done a couple different ways now, which I think are interesting, because if you don't want to go to 1.5, you don't think it's enough, you think it's too much, you could do this. So I'm just curious on your thought, Shane. So I've played in a couple tight end premium leagues now that have 2 PPR. So Safe Leagues has 2 PPR. Safe Leagues, if you don't know, is a service where they provide the commissioning for you. Not League Safe Leagues, same company, but it's season long in Dynasty Leagues where they commission for you. They've gone to 2 PPR, 2 points for PPR. The other way you could do it, I'm in a Dynasty League right now where it's still 1 point PPR for tight ends, but you have to start 2, and that essentially makes it a tight end premium league. So there's a lot of different ways. And when Shane's talking about tight end premium, he just means raising the value and the position scarcity of the tight end.
One of the reasons I like tight end premium is, for one, it makes those elite guys like Kittle and Kelsey even more valuable. I'm generally not a guy who takes one of those guys early, but it makes the argument far more compelling if Travis Kelsey, who's getting 8-9 receptions a game, is getting 1.5. It makes guys like Austin Hooper, who is getting 7, 8, 9 receptions a game, far more valuable. And it just makes those lower end guys who are getting going 5 for 50 actually startable in some of your leagues, which I enjoy. But say you don't want to get crazy, you don't want to do tight end premium, you can't convince your league to go super flex. It's hard to
convince your league to do anything.
Oh my God. Yeah. It's like moving. Yeah. And actually, you know what? One of the reasons we wanted to have to show early, I'm glad you pointed that out, Al. One of the reasons I wanted to start to show early is because I feel like the time to start getting your team on board with making changes to the league format is earlier. If you can get them engaged, I mean, I like to do it right at the end of last season when it's fresh in people's minds, because, I mean, look, we've been talking, there is no off season for us, but that's not the reality for a lot of people, especially in your home leagues. And right after the season ends is when you just really propose some of the rules changes. But if that didn't happen, it's not too late. Propose it early before redraft season starts. Just get it percolating in people's minds, right? If people start to think about it, they might be, their initial knee-jerk reaction is, no, I don't want to make those changes. But maybe if it's sitting in there and you just kind of, you talk to them a few times over the next couple months, they may be a little bit more open to it. But some baby steps that I'm thinking that we just did in one of my home leagues is just add another flex position, add a second flex position. Or, if you're 2 wide receivers, maybe make it 3 wide receivers. Like every single year, just try to step it up a little bit. If your team is a little bit more complex, consider an IDP league. It just gives you, helps you understand both facets of the ball. I mean, we were talking about blind spot players. I played in an IDP league probably about 7-8 years ago, and I haven't played in one since. And I'm kind of considering, starting another one up this year, just because I want to mix it up a little bit. So
the IDP, I know everyone swears by it. I'm not there yet because I'm just so, I just don't want to start analyzing a whole nother game. And I get it.
Sounds exhausting.
Yes, just given the number of leagues and the number of projects from a fantasy perspective I've committed to. But yeah, I hope you do it, because it would be nice to have an IDP expert on the Flex network like yourself.
That would be interesting. So then the last little thing I'm going to touch on is just auction leagues. Look, I love auction leagues. In terms of redraft, they are my favorite format over snake drafts. Al, you and I were in an auction league together last year. Are you in typically a lot of auction leagues, or?
No, we did ours last year and I enjoyed it. I just and it's so funny. You always hear, once you go auction, you'll never go back. That's the best way. I feel like I'm in the minority here. I've done auctions. I don't really like them as far as like, I mean, they're fine. They're fun. Don't get me wrong. And they're probably more fair. But if I have, let's just use a big amount. Let's say I have to put $1,000 into a league. I don't want to do an auction because one, I don't feel like I'm a skilled budgeter in that way.
Okay.
The best auctioneers in the world, they have a real poker advantage over you. So for fun, like when we're doing our, $50, $25 league and we just want to throw an auction there, no problem. Cause it's a real skill. I feel like I know the snake draft board backwards and forward. So for my particular skill set in this particular time, I don't want to put my money where my mouth is. Fun. Yes. Real stake in the game. I'm sitting it out.
Yeah. I mean, the thing I like about auction leagues is the fact that if you want to go and get your guy, you can get your guy. When you're in a snake draft, if you're not getting the one, a top 3 pick, you're probably not going to get one of those top 3 running backs. You're not going to get Saquon. You're not going to get CMC. There's literally no chance. If you're picking at the 12 spot, there's 0 chance. Whereas if you really want to pay up and get your guy in an auction league, you can do that. And to your point, Al, I mean, look, there's definitely an art to it. We switched to an auction league probably about 5-6 years ago in my home league. And I love it. I mean, it's something that we look forward to every year. It's like we're getting a little bit older. We have families now, a lot of my buddies, but it's something where, every year we all get together. It's only a 10-person league, but we get together for 4 or 5 hours on an evening before the season starts. And it's just a fun night. And look, last year we did ours over, Google Hangouts, which was kind of crazy because we're all over North America. But I just there's just a different dynamic. I'm not saying every league needs to be an auction league.
Don't get me wrong. I had a blast when we did it. Yeah.
And I sure hope you're going to join this year again, Al, because I will. I don't know how many.
I don't know how many leagues I can be in, man. But yeah, I mean, you guys will probably drag me in for another round. So
absolutely. Okay, so we're going to move on unless there's any sort of redraft leagues that we've missed here, Al.
Oh, I mean, keep moving. I'm enjoying this. I'm enjoying commenting on the different formats. I think it's fun. Do you want me to bring up a format that I like? Is that what you're asking me here? Or do you just want to move on to your next topic?
I'm going to move on to the next topic.
Okay, let's go.
Cool with that. All right. Yep. Okay. So next we're going to dive into the world of Dynasty and Devy leagues. So Dynasty, it's something that you and I have obviously fallen in love with. We're in Dynasty leagues together. How many new Dynasty leagues did you join this year, Al?
4, including one of them, which is a best ball format, which there's not going to be any work involved. So, but yeah, four new leagues. And I don't think I'm done yet, man. I'm almost out of a redraft state of mind and into the Dynasty format.
And look, I mean, a lot of people, and myself included, I mean, I'm in 3 leagues. I haven't joined any new Dynasty leagues this year, but
I invited you into my big one. Yeah, $300 entry. I enjoyed it. I invited you.
I ain't got that kind of cash, Al. Come on.
Yeah, you do. Shane's just so you know, Shane's loaded. He's a trust fund baby.
That's right. I wish that's my dream. That's why I'm podcasting.
Yeah, he's doing this because he doesn't have to work.
Absolutely. So look, Dynasty leagues are amazing, and look, if you're listening to this podcast, you know what a Dynasty league is. But for those who don't, Al, do you want to just give like the 101 of what a Dynasty league is?
Oh, here's the key difference: is you draft the players and you're married to them forever. You don't throw them back in the pool next year. The only way to build your team is through trades and through rookie drafts, which happen each year. I think that's the simplest way to state it. Once you draft the guys, that's your boys forever.
And then I guess the next level of that is a Devy league. Al, what's a Devy league?
I mean, my definition is that you're drafting everything from high school players. I mean, that it can go as deep as you want. So Devy stands for development. So you're drafting developmental players. And in some leagues, they limit it to college only. So you can draft players coming in from high school. I mean, it's crazy. It's the next level. But now, I mean, look, high school, what's the signing day, as they call it, when high school players announce where they're going to sign for colleges, has become a national televised event. So for people that want to, you can draft. I remember being in, hearing about Devy leagues where people are drafting Adrian Peterson and LaShawn McCoy their high school senior year, and then they have them for their career. So that's really what a Devy league is you're getting these players before they even think they may never get to the NFL.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's like working backwards, right? If you're doing a redraft league and you join a Dynasty league, you get a better understanding of the rookie players coming in for your redraft leagues. If you join a Devy league, you understand these college players well before they're even, leaving the college game to go into the NFL. So at every layer you get, it is, I'm going to use that word again, a little bit more degenerate, but you will become an expert if you decide to join a Devy league. I'm not in any Devy leagues. I mean, I live in Canada, so for me to get into the college game, it's tough, man. That's a commitment that I just right now in my life I just don't have the time, frankly, the time for. But it's something that's fun. One format that I've never played in, but it's called Reality Sports Online, and it's a dynasty type format. But this is where there's actual like a salary cap. You sign your players to contracts. You can do like guaranteed contracts, and it's just kind of that next layer. It's being more of a GM and getting a little even more nuance. Have you ever been in those types of leagues, Al, or with actual player contracts?
No. So it's funny enough is that I thought I wanted to be in one of those, and I was invited to be in one of those last year, and I agreed to be in one of those, and then I quickly had buyer's remorse because I was like, oh my God, this is going to be. You should not sign up for leagues that you cannot participate, like give your all to, or at least give most of your all. And thank God somebody took it's like I almost felt like I bought a puppy and got home and been like, oh my God, I don't want a puppy, So thank God somebody wanted the team and took it from me, and meanwhile they left the year after. So no, I've experienced it. It's crazy. I mean, and then you've heard about dynastyowner.com, the new with it's similar to what you're talking about. They're going to have a platform for it where they're using actual NFL salaries.
That's so crazy.
Yeah,
I mean, look, maybe one day that's next level kind of shit over here, but I think it's exciting. Look, if you love fantasy football, that one's a commitment.
But don't be in 10 or 12 leagues like Shane and I are in. Just make like 3 or 4 leagues is like probably the perfect thing. So pick your formats wisely and don't commit to leagues you're going to drop out of.
Guys, the worst thing in fantasy football period is owners who are not active. If you're in Dynasty, please be active in your damn leagues or get out of the damn league, because the expectation from your co-owners is that you will be in it. So that's an aside. Okay. That's it for the types of like full season long type leagues. A couple crazy formats that I want to move on to. Have you ever played in a guillotine league, Al?
I've never played it. Is that one? We'll explain what a guillotine league is. I've never played in one. I've heard a lot that they're gaining in popularity. They seem like a lot of fun, but give me the top line. If you were describing it to an alien from another planet, explain how you would a guillotine league.
Okay, so you'd go through and there's 17 teams and you do a draft just like any standard draft, but it's a total points scored type league.
Like Rhoda, okay.
It's kind of like a Rhoda style type game. So in this case, you could have 17 teams, one for each week, or you could just have as many teams as you can find players. But essentially, each week, the lowest scoring team is eliminated. You're out. And what makes it interesting is every one of the players on that person's team gets thrown back into the free agent pool. And then all the remaining teams get to bid on those remaining players. So it makes it really interesting because a team might have a guy like Christian McCaffrey or Saquon Barkley, but the rest of the team is kind of hard garbage. And, if they're the lowest team in any given week, they're eliminated.
Okay,
and then the strategy becomes you only have X number, it would be, it'd have to have a value for a fab budget, right? And you need to determine, okay, am I going to hold off early and wait for some of these high-end players to be eliminated, risking the fact that maybe because those high-end players are on teams, they won't be eliminated? Or do you go all in early and try to get a super team? So really what it comes down to is every single week, one team gets eliminated. The remaining teams get to bid on the remaining free agents. And at the end of the season, who's ever still standing wins your league.
That's
I think it's kind of fun.
Yeah, kind of fun. Again, one of those things where you need to be very active, kind of plan out a strategy. And if you're somebody who's in 8 leagues, you probably shouldn't do it. But if you're in 1 or 2 or 3, I really think that 5 leagues is the right amount. You stop enjoying it as much when it gets to where you stop paying attention to it. But the format you just talked about sounds a lot of fun, and I hear him talked about all the time, and it seems like a great format.
Yeah, I mean, our boy Mike Yeager, who we play with and who listens to the show, he was the one who really introduced me to this type of format. I've never played in one, but I think I want to get into one this year. And it's just really interesting. Another game that's a similar type of format that, I did a little bit of reading up on, and I'm not really a fan of it, but it's called a Vampire League. Yeah, are you familiar with the Vampire League?
I've heard of it. Again, I have never played it, so explain it to the people.
So it's the same sort of thing. I mean, it's a 10, 12 team league, and what happens is that it's a random draw to start, and essentially the 12th or whatever, like the 12th pick, the 10th pick, whatever the last pick is, they're considered the vampire. So each week there's just a standard head-to-head matchup, but in a given week, the vampire, and they're the vampire for the whole season, okay? So the vampire, they do not draft. All the other teams draft their teams, and at the end of the draft, the vampire will go and build his team based off of whatever's available on the waiver wire. And then each week, the vampire gets to choose their opponent. Okay. And if they beat their opponent in that given week, they get to steal whatever player they want from that team. So there's some strategy there, right? Because you need to look at matchups for your potential opponents. And the caveat being that you can only choose each opponent once until everybody's been played through. But each week, in theory, and also a big part is only the vampire is allowed to get free agent players. So when you draft a team and you're one of like the other 11 teams, you cannot get free agents. But you do have to set your lineup each week. So
yeah, I don't begrudge anyone. This format sounds too
it sounds very complicated.
Yeah, and almost like I don't like all these like cute rules. I mean, sure, if you want to play this, it's just getting away from like what fantasy football means to me. But people like this kind of stuff, so I'm all for it. I love that you're explaining to me because I had no idea what this was.
This same thing. This is something that Mike brought to my attention last year, and
it
so
sounds
just, I looked into it. It's not something for me, but if you're interested, it sounds like want to get a little bit crazy, regular fantasy football board.
Yeah,
league.
I don't like a lot of cute rules. Like somebody just asked me to be in another dynasty startup, and I'm always interested, but it's like you start one running back and one receiver and 5 flex. I don't like all these crazy. I think the NFFC has it figured out with the, minus the, we both like super flex, but 3 receivers, 2 running backs, and a flex. I mean, that really covers what is, and maybe I'll change my mind one day, and I like all these little cute sort of spin-off games and they're fun to think about. But as far as like what I'm actually going to get involved in, I mean, it sounds like you feel the same way I do, Vampire League fun to talk about. Not so sure I want to be in one.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, we're going to move on to more of the betting type leagues. So we all know what best ball is, but for those who don't, Al, can you just explain what a best ball league is?
Yeah, sure enough, there's no waiver wire. You draft your team, and that's it for the year. And what the key thing is that it eliminates start sit. Like you never have to make those impossible decisions. Who do I start in my wide receiver 3, John Brown or Jamison Crowder? It just whoever gets the best score, the software automatically inserts your best players into your best position. So the good part is no start sit, no maintenance. The bad part is that by week 6, you might not have a tight end. So you have to make sure you're building depth at tight end and depth at some of these other positions. So it puts your best players, your best ball into the starting positions, and then whoever has the most points at the end of the year. Again, it's a great way to practice drafting in the offseason, to have no maintenance during the season. That's the advantage of the best ball.
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it there. I mean, one of the reasons I like to do best balls is, for one, it's fun. Like one of the most fun things of any fantasy league is the draft.
Yeah,
so you get the fun part of that.
And just think about what we used to do to practice drafting before best ball. Like we would have these mocks, and some asshole would ruin it by having like drafting Tim Tebow first overall, or most commonly people would draft for 3-4 rounds and then leave. And you're not really getting a sense of how the draft would go. When someone has stake in the game, even $3, $5, they pay attention, and they will give you a real assessment of how the draft board is going to fall. So I think it's compared to 10 years ago, 5 years ago, when mock drafting was just the way we practiced, that this is a real way to get a sense of your redraft draft board.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it. I mean, we all did mock drafts back in the day, and listen, by like round 5, half the teams were gone. They already checked out, and it was just it wasn't real, right? Whereas even, I mean, they don't have the $1 best balls anymore, but they now have $5 best balls on best ball 10s.
Yep.
And look, it's not a ton of money, but it's enough money where somebody actually gives a crap.
It's stake in the game.
Be drafting. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I mean, we've talked at length about best balls. I want to have a best ball strategy show sooner rather than later on here that we can talk about, but we're going to move on from that. The next, obviously, is just DFS. Everybody knows what DFS. There's FanDuel, there's DraftKings, there's a salary cap. You choose your players. But Al, some other styles of DFS, one that you got me into last year that I really enjoyed was overlay DFS.
Oh yeah.
Can you explain to the people what overlay DFS
Well,
is?
you played it, so why don't you give the explanation? Go ahead. I want to hear from.
Well,
your
okay. So
perspective.
essentially, for me, what overlay DFS is that it's not a salary cap type.
It was an either or. It was a
setup.
start
It's,
sit.
Exactly. It's a start sit decision. So you're choosing between usually it's one or two or three types of players, that are similar in quality. So you're choosing between like George Kittle or Travis Kelce in a given week. And you make those choices and you go down and you set your lineup. And essentially you're on the same playing field as any one of these other players because for one, there's no salary cap, right? So there's not a lot of algorithms out there. And it's more of a unique type of service. And it's what I like is it's kind of fun because when you're going through it, I actually like to do both. I would do my overlay DFS lineups first and kind of get a feel on, okay, what is the market looking like? And then I would go set my my FanDuel lineups and understand, okay, where there's some discrepancies potentially in salary caps. I wouldn't proclaim to be a DFS expert at all. I mean, we go to DFS Army for that knowledge, but this was just a fun game that I enjoyed playing. It's pretty low cost as well. And if you guys want to try a little bit something a little different, I would absolutely recommend overlay DFS.
There's a bunch of those sites that have popped up now, and it seems to be a popular thing. There's Thrive Fantasy, which we've worked with over at DFS Army. So yeah, if you like. If your start sits aren't agonizing enough during the regular season, you want some more action on it. Those sites are great places to drive yourself even more crazy.
That's right. Okay, so that's it for DFS. Last but not least, more so general football type games. A style that you and I enjoy playing is Survivor Leagues. And Survivor League, Survivor is just a whole lot of fun. For those who don't know what a Survivor League is, essentially you're in a league with X number of players. I mean, I think one of your buddies puts it on, Alan. There's like 50, 60 people that participate.
I think it can be anywhere from 10 people to 1,000 people. I mean, whatever. Sky's the limit.
Absolutely. And the premise of this is that in each week, you choose an NFL team that you think is going to win that week. If they win, you move on to the next week.
No spreads either.
No spreads, just straight up. If they win, or if they lose, you move on or get eliminated if they lose. So what kind of makes it interesting is just the fact that, first of all, you can only choose each team one time. So as the season goes on, if you're choosing Kansas City Chiefs, you're choosing the Baltimore Ravens early, later on you're choosing, okay, maybe I'm down to the Bills or to the Jets, or, it gets thinner and thinner. And
you don't want to, do you save teams? Do you use them early? Right. That's the strategy.
Yeah, there's a lot of strategy to it. So last year we participated in a Survivor League, and hopefully we're going to do it again this year.
Oh, yeah.
And it was just a show we talked about every week on our show of some of what our favorite Survivor picks were that particular week. But
it's a harder game than you think, because you're like, oh, of course, I'm going to pick the 10-point favorite every week. 10-point favorites lose in the NFL.
Yeah. My suggestion to you, not just you, Al, you, the listening
proverbial
audience, the proverbial you, is if you're playing in a Survivor League, maybe step up a little bit and put 2 entries in. Give yourself a little bit of a little lifeblood there. That way, if you're hedging 1 week, say you're on week 5 and you're trying to hedge between 2 matchups, you choose 2 different players, and it just makes things a little more interesting. So I think that's fun.
Some leagues, some Survivor League chains also have a buyback. What you could do is, if you there's different ways to do it, but if you get out, there's double elimination, so you have to lose twice is one way. Another way is that if you lose in week 1, you can buy your entry back for the same price in week 2. And then the other ones have that you can buy back at any time up until week 8. So even if you get out once, get out twice, you could still keep buying back in. But you still can't use the teams that you've already used. It's not like it resets. Yeah. So you just keep buying. That's what builds the pot. So there's a lot of different ways to get it, but the standard way of playing is, you get 1 entry, 1 shot. So sorry, as many entries as you want, but single elimination. So my favorite game.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's just a lot of fun. If you haven't been in one, look, if you're in a fantasy league and there's 10, 12 players, owners in that league,
it's a good idea.
Start one for $1 each, $5 each, $10 each. It's a lot of fun. It just adds another layer of entertainment. I mean, what I love about fantasy is it makes games that I generally wouldn't give a crap about interesting. It's the same sort of thing with the Survivor League.
I've seen leagues like that, Shane, like where fantasy leagues that are doing rookie drafts, the winner gets an extra rookie pick. Like I think it would be rookie pick 25 before the 3rd round starts would go to the Survivor winner.
That's cool. I love it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's all fun things. So
Yep.
last but not least, I mean, you can go to any websites. There's mybookie.ag. You just Google prop bets. I mean, prop bets are always fun. Typically, it's more popular during the Super Bowl, but it's just another way to mix things up. And betting restrictions are really starting to open up in the U.S. In Canada, here we're it's the Wild West. We can bet on a lot of different things.
State by
state. That's right. But I think in general, the narrative is that states are starting to become a little bit more open to sports gambling. And look, I mean, I'm not a sports bettor. That's not something that I'm interested in. If you have a problem, obviously there's lots of different places you can get help. But if you're a casual player, it's just a little bit of spice. You bet $10 or something like that. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I enjoy the concept of the sports betting. It's why I work with those guys over at sportsbetarmy.com. I'm intrigued by spreads and odds and, player props and all that kind of stuff. So that's, again, one of my favorite ways. There's no more pure form of fantasy football than against the spread. There's no hiding from it. It's like, here's your money. Which side of the equation are you on? It's not like, oh, okay, this receiver just didn't have a good week, but he's good the next week, like in DFS. So it's, again, one of the most pure forms.
All right, so that's it. We're gonna stop it there. Hopefully, we gave you guys at least a few ideas. If you're a commissioner, poll your league about adding a few different things. If you are in a league and you're not a commissioner, email your commissioner about some league changes. Consider joining some of these other different leagues. Hit us up, maybe. I mean, like I said, I'm thinking about starting a guillotine type league. If you're interested, hit us up at the Flex Network 1, and we'll get you in a league. So, Al, where do the good people find you?
I'll make it quick. At Alan Seslowsky, AlanSeslowsky. That's Twitter. That's TikTok. That's LinkedIn. And at Alan Fantasy Football on Instagram.
Love it. You're obviously here on the Flex Network. You're at DFS Army.
Doing my rankings for DFS Army, roster watch. I do 2-3 articles a week, just 500 words, just giving my thoughts on whatever's going on that week, and 2 3-minute videos. So if you go to rosterwatch.com, I think there's no paywall for my content. You go there and you can click on it on their ticker, and there's plenty of content that I'm putting out each week if you're interested in anything stupid thoughts that I have in my head.
That's why you're the dragon, baby. You're spitting hot fire. You can follow us on Twitter at the Flex Network 1. If you like what you're listening to, please rate us and review us. If you like what you're watching, please like and subscribe. Ladies and gentlemen, for Flex Matt, for Al, we are the Flex Network.
This is the Flex Network. This is the Flex Network. Flex on them. Flex on everybody. This right here is the Flex Network. Yeah.